The 2022 season represented a big change, a new era, a new path forward for the Minnesota Vikings. And I know some Vikings fans that had to be thrilled, ecstatic, that the era of Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer had finally drawn to the close. Because it was obvious, especially when it came to Zimmer, as was just kind of a bitter old man, and it was fucking time for dude to pack up and leave. Or be shown the damn door. They needed some fresh life, some fresh blood, some new leadership, some new energy in the building for the Vikings, and that's what they got. They hired a new general manager in Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, hired a new head coach, the offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams, former NFL backup quarterback Kevin O'Connell, is a guy that I've actually had my eye on for a number of years and saying, yeah, someday he's going to end up being an NFL head coach. So you got a new leadership trust there in Minnesota, and to me, if nothing else, it's just amazing like how different the vibe can be and feel sometimes when maybe you don't make a lot of other roster moves. And not saying the Vikings did nothing, but it wasn't like they completely overhauled the roster or anything like that. But just to have some different leadership, some different perspective there sometimes can make all of the difference, at least in the short term. And it certainly did for the Vikings this past season. They finished 13-4 and won the NFC North. Now, maybe some people felt like, hey, the Vikings could win this division this year, but 13 wins? I don't know if anybody would have had them at 13 wins. Maybe they didn't. I just missed it, but I highly doubt it. But the funny thing is, though, as you watch the Vikings throughout the year, like, it's on the one hand, you don't want to sound like just a hater, or maybe you do because you don't give a crap, but you watch them and you say, man, something's off here. Something's not right. Like, yeah, this is a team that's winning a lot of games, but they're playing some bad teams. They're getting some good breaks. I don't really buy into them as being a contender. They certainly don't feel like a threat to the Eagles in the NFC, or let alone maybe the 49ers as well. They feel like a team that if they get into the playoffs could potentially be an early exit because their record isn't a reflection of the actual team. And you'd forgive me for saying, after watching the wild card round, if that isn't exactly how the hell we kind of saw it play out with the Minnesota Vikings. That's why I even picked the Giants to upset them in the wild card round for whatever the hell that's worth. Because the Vikings just, reality caught up with them as much as anything else I could say. You know, it's not like they were a bad team, and I'm not trying to disrespect it because 13-4 is 13-4. But their offense certainly had to lead the way. They were 7th in total yards per game, 8th in points scored. Kirk Cousins, as easy of a target as he can be to pick on sometimes, as much as it is easy and fun to make fun of him and the team that's paying him a crap ton of money, the reality is he did throw for over 4,500 passing yards and 29 touchdowns. Is he elite? No, but a lot of teams could do a hell of a lot better, or a hell of a lot worse than Kirk Cousins, I should say. Justin Jefferson had a monster season, surpassed Randy Moss's single-season receiving yards record for the team, had over 1,800 yards receiving. Dalvin Cook over 1,100 yards rushing. Like, offensively, this was a fun, exciting team to watch. However, their defense was still really, really bad. They were 31st in total yards allowed, 28th in points allowed. And you look at them, excluding the playoff game, they had 11 games where they allowed 24 points or more. And I kind of look at that, you know, when you say 21 to 24 points allowed as a defense, that's kind of like NFL average, right? Well, they went over the average 11 out of 17 times in the regular season, and then also gave up more points than that when it came to the playoff game against the Giants. So the defense was bad and didn't really get any better. So what do you do now if you're the Minnesota Vikings? You're a team that did win 13 games, but still feel like you're quite a bit away from being a real contender. But maybe in the NFC, you're not as far away because it's kind of a soft-ass, weak-ass conference, which is kind of true, but maybe you are still a bit of ways away. You go into this offseason, at the time of this recording, about $20 million or so over the salary cap. Like, how do you get under the cap? How do you improve the team with that limited cap space? And then you've got also the question that's inevitably going to come up with, what does this team do at the quarterback position in the long term? Like, you talk about Kirk Cousins, yeah, he's really good. And he is. Like, it's easy to pick on dudes sometimes. It really is. But damn, like, he's a top 10 NFL quarterback. I don't feel that's incredibly controversial to say, is it? I certainly don't think so. Like, you could do a whole hell of a lot worse, and about 2/3 of the teams in the league do worse than Kirk Cousins as their starting quarterback. This is a guy that's durable, reliable, and puts up some decent numbers. Now, you could sometimes say in some big spots, how does he look? Fair question. When the spotlight is the brightest, how's he play? Yeah. But again, sometimes that is focusing too much on one guy and ignoring some of the bigger team's problems. Like, it's not Kirk Cousins' fault that the Vikings defense sucked. You know what I mean? Like, statistically, they absolutely sucked. And watching them play, they were really, really, really bad. Like, Cousins and Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook and then improved Vikings offensive line can only help that, but so much. At some point in time, you got to look at the defense. You got to look at the talent on defense, or maybe in this case, the lack of talent on that defense, the coaching on the defensive side of the ball, and got to say something's got to get a lot better here in a hurry. But it also doesn't take away from the fact of, you're talking about Kirk Cousins, a guy in his 30s now. Like, do you really want to continue to tie yourself to him long term? Like, if you do, what's that going to mean? If you don't, are you positioned to have a guy in the wings? Makes me wonder why, if the Vikings would be a bit of a player in the quarterback market in terms of the draft. I would say that, except for the fact that they don't have a second-round pick because of what Kwesi Adofo-Mensah did during the draft last year in that trade with the Detroit Lions, which was all types of fucking weird. So the Vikings enter this draft with pick number 24, I guess technically 23 because Miami had to forfeit their first-round pick, but they don't have their second-round pick. Like, you know, what are you going to do with that? You know, you got one pick in round one, then you don't pick again until later in round 3. So a team that needs some young talent on defense, probably looking at having to trade back in round 1 to get some additional draft capital. You know, where's that help going to come from? And then by the time that help gets there and can really help contribute, is it going to be too late? I don't know. So it's like the Vikings had a really good season, but unless something dramatically changes or improves, it feels like this could be one of those teams that is set up for a bit of a backslide in 2023.